Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech culminated the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom and is a watershed moment in American television history. But did you know that the march is one of the earliest simultaneous international television broadcasts? And that the decision to air the broadcast in the Soviet Union was pulled just 5 minutes before it would go on air. I've never heard anyone tell this story before, so I'm really excited to do it for you. I'm Dr. Miller, your TikTok TV historian, and today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Television, of course, was an important instrument utilized by civil rights leaders, and commentators noted at the time that this march was better covered by television and in the press than any event had been since Kennedy's inauguration. That's probably in part why it's also so well remembered in 2024, because it was so well archived. ITV in London, a commercial station, for instance, purchased clear live pictures from the march to air on British screens utilizing the Telstar satellite system, an early American communications satellite system. Actually, there are a few Telstar satellites, and they're still up there. The first one launched in the summer of 1962 and eventually went off air because it was in part a victim of a Soviet nuclear blast test. The second one launched in spring of 1963, and by July, all the transmission had ended with it. On August 13th, just 2 weeks before the march, it came back on air. Telstar was not a geosynchronous satellite or a geostationary satellite, and it was in low Earth orbit, meaning it could only broadcast a television signal when it was visible to both the transmitting and receiving ground stations. For Washington, D.C. and Western Europe, that was about at 4:15 Eastern Time, which I believe was about an hour after Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous speech. A reporter in London wrote, "Here is by far the most sensitive point in the international American image, and the world is, for once, at its doorstep." I think this doesn't really make it into the textbooks because the time of day that Europe could actually air the live pictures from the march was what this newspaper called an undramatic part of the march. But of course, those kinds of actualities are important to historians. It's an important part of this particular historical event. Well, what about the Soviet Union, you say? The march was actually expected to air on Soviet screens through the Intervision channel, which makes sense because American racism was often a part of Soviet propaganda against the United States. But Moscow television canceled plans to screen the march just 5 minutes before it was set to go on the air. Officials at Moscow's television headquarters refused to indicate why. And when asked if there had been some kind of technical or other failure with the broadcast, a commentator just said, "I have no more information." And I actually don't know why. I'm TV Doc. I'm looking for Soviet Doc to stitch this and explain what actually happened with this transmission. Until then, like and follow, and the more you'll know.